Jujutsu Kaisen Chapter 228 review. And if you like Jujutsu Kaisen and other anime content, subscribe for more. So this week we have one of the best chapters in the entire Gojo vs Sukuna fight so far, and there is a lot to dive into here, even from the very start when we open up with the Black Dwarf domain, and we see Kusakabe shocked at the size of Gojo's barrier, and we get the info that a smaller barrier is usually a stronger barrier. And Maki brings up what a lot of people were talking about last week, which is that the actual volume of the domain is not influenced directly by the barrier. And usually this just adds another layer of defense against somebody trying to escape your domain, because this makes it extremely difficult to find the outer shell inside of the domain to even attempt an escape. But Kusakabe notes that the most important part of forming a barrier is the image you have of it for yourself. And if you envision a barrier that is too small to contain your normal size, usually it will collapse. But since Gojo knows what it's like to be trapped inside of a tiny Rubik's Cube, he is able to envision a smaller barrier than probably anybody, or at least anybody who has not been trapped inside of the prison realm. And even given all of that word salad, Kusakabe is still confused as to how they're able to shift the conditions of their domains so easily. Because we learn that usually a barrier, and especially a domain barrier, has an internal parameter and an external parameter like creation speed. And Kusakabe directly notes volume as an internal parameter, and really I'm guessing that has relation to your innate domain, things like Dagon's Beach or something like Gojo's Unlimited Void. Because the actual volume of your domain seems to be dictated by your innate domain's volume, which is inherent to the user, while something like creation speed of your barrier, that is a skill issue, and a 0.2 second domain you can learn if you are talented enough. And we see Higurama and Hikari shocked by this, and Kusakabe tells them that they are an exception to this rule because their domains open as a default part of their technique. And we immediately cut over to Mei after this, and she says that maybe Gojo was trying to encompass all of Malevolent Shrine in his Unlimited Voids barrier. And she more importantly notes that Gojo's barrier seems to be holding out against Sukuna's technique, but we find out from a sweating Yuta that Sukuna has also decreased the effective range of his domain to increase the output of his technique, and Gojo's barrier shatters for a third time. But to the shock of everyone, Sukuna's domain collapses as well, and it is revealed to everyone that he has sustained so much damage while fighting Gojo inside of the domain that he was unable to maintain his, and the spectators cheer for Gojo, and Sukuna looks a little impressed and pissed off as their domains collapse simultaneously. But Kusakabe is not done screaming, and he asks for how long they were inside the barrier and if anyone had tracked the time, to which Mei responds it was exactly 3 minutes from the moment the barriers went up. And now that both their domains have collapsed, Higurama thinks their curse techniques are burnt out. But Maki, who is unfazed by this, says that Gojo should just be able to recover his with RCT. But our local potential rat, Angel, says that Gojo made an error by showing that to Sukuna because now he can do it too. And he was also able to learn how to make himself into a cursed object after seeing Kenjaku do it once. So I have a few things to say about Angel. First of all, why would you not tell this to the class? Whose side are you on? Sukuna is secretly Jujutsu Taskmaster and you tell nobody. And if you're unaware of who Taskmaster is, he is a Marvel Comics villain that is able to copy your fighting style by seeing it once. So after this, they immediately go back to hand-to-hand combat, but something is off, and we get the internal dialogue of Gojo. And he is starting to get alarmed that Sukuna is only using the Dismantle and Cleave imbued into his barrier and domain amplification, going so far as to note that he even had the upper hand in the 3 minutes they were inside of their domains. And it seems like this is the real turning point for Gojo, where he's like, okay, Sukuna actually took damage when he didn't have to. And more importantly, he is confused as to why Sukuna has not decided to use Mahoraga. And we finally get actual confirmation, or at least partial confirmation, that Gojo is aware of the adaptation effect of Mahoraga's wheel. A lot of people assumed he knew about this, but as far as we know, nobody has ever tamed Mahoraga, so to actually know about the adaptation and figure it out, somebody must have performed a useless exorcism ritual in the past. It's a bit of an offhand line, but if you do a group exorcism ritual, you can still win and not have everybody die, but you just won't get a tamed Mahoraga. But just as Gojo is beginning to piece together what is going on and what Sukuna is planning, we see the Dharma Chakra in the darkness and it makes a click. And before the chapter ends, we see Gojo having a nosebleed and looking dizzy as he finally realizes what has been happening the entire time. And that is where the chapter ends and the cliffhanger we are left on, with Gojo in a pretty disadvantageous position. So this is a great chapter, and there are a lot of things I want to touch on here, especially with the whole wheel and the shadows and when this thing came out to begin with. So when did Sukuna pop this thing open? Well, from the dialogue in this chapter, it was at least before the 3 minutes they were in the domain. but I would not be surprised if it has been out the entire time, and a lot of people think that's impossible because of domain amplification stopping the innate technique, and I think that's an excellent point because that is what we have been told repeatedly. But the thing here is, there is a lot to imply that Sukuna has had this wheel out the entire time because he has not been using 10 shadows in his domain at all, and we just don't know if there is a difference between the innate technique stored in your soul versus the one stored in your current vessel if you are an incarnated sorcerer, and how that interacts with your domain amplification and your technique. But either way, Sukuna has adapted to something, or Mahoraga has adapted to something, because Gojo would be unaware of the personal wheel. This is something we have only ever seen used by someone who has tamed Mahoraga, so there's really no way Gojo would know about this, and nobody from a previous exorcism ritual would know about this. And the only other person we know that has ever seen this was Yorzu, and she did. So Gojo being caught off guard by this, that makes sense, and whatever is going on with the shadows, if the wheel is in the shadows, apparently they are hard for even these 6 eyes to make out. I'm going to say something here that shouldn't really be a hot take, but it is for some reason. Gojo is currently losing the fight. That's not to say Gojo is getting bodied, but he has been stuck playing reactionary combat to everything Sukuna does. And even major W's that Gojo got in this fight, like getting out of Malevolent Shrine, shooting Sukuna in the face with red, and blitzing him with blue, well, it turns out Sukuna was probably adapting to him the whole time. And the major advantage Gojo has had in this fight the entire time is that Sukuna cannot get past infinity without domain expansion or domain amplification. And at the very least, we now know that Mahoraga is likely adapted to infinity because Gojo keeps up his barrier inside of his domain that he was just slamming Sukuna in the face with. We don't know how long the wheel was out. I'm expecting it was probably out by at least the first domain expansion. That would explain why he didn't just drop a Mahoraga out while Gojo had no technique. But if it wasn't out then, we can pretty much guarantee it was out during the 3-minute expansion in this chapter. And the reality is that right now, Gojo got punked by Sukuna and he was able to use the wheel to pull one over on him. So Gojo is in desperate need of an actual W here. I know some people are saying that this is Gojover and Gojo's gonna die after this, and no, he's not. But this is a turning point in the fight, and Gojo is probably about to be pushed more than he has ever been. But before the fight is over, Gojo has to accomplish something that is permanently damaging to Sukuna, because the victory that Gojo gets from this fight is probably going to be a Pyrrhic one. Because I've said it before, and I'll say it again, and I'll probably say it every week, that 10 Shadows has got to go. That technique with Sukuna is too strong. And if those shadows can hide things from these 6 eyes, that is overpowered. And at the end of this chapter, it looks like Gojo is poisoned, and a lot of people think that Sukuna did this because he's the king of poisons from the one mistranslation. And even though it may be a mistranslation, I don't think that him using poisons in this fight is totally without merit, just because Gojo has been foreshadowed to be weak to poisons 10 years ago. And more importantly, his limitless barrier was noted to be weak to poisons 10 years ago. Now whether he fixed it or not, we don't know, but that being mentioned at all is a little sus. And even if it's not poison and it is just overuse of the 6 eyes, either way, Gojo is in trouble. But if you're a massive Gojo fan, do not give up hope. Gojo is not going to go out like a total punk. But that's just my opinion, and I want to hear yours. Let me know what you think about Gojo, the wheel, and this whole fight and the future of Jujutsu Kaisen. Also, special note this video, I have hit 10,000 subscribers. I want to thank everybody who has subscribed over the past months, whether you're here from the beginning or you just came in from my last video. You're all equally appreciated. And of all the series I could be lucky enough to talk about to so many people, I feel really fortunate to get to talk about this one. So thank you guys. And if you aren't subscribed and you like content like this, subscribe for more. And as always, thanks for watching.